My name is Wendy Dixon. I am 32 years old, and until 3 weeks ago, I did not exist. I was a ghost in my own life. If you were to drive past my parents' house in the suburbs of Wellesley, Massachusetts, just outside of Boston, you would see a structure that represents the absolute pinnacle of the American dream. It is a white colonial mansion with black shutters that are painted fresh every 2 years. The lawn is not just grass, it is a green velvet carpet that looks like it was manicured with cuticle scissors. The 2-car garage is always closed, hiding the luxury vehicles inside. It is the kind of house that screams to the world that the people living inside are good people, successful people, a happy family. For 3 decades, I lived in the shadow of that perfection. But I wasn't a member of the family. I was a function. I was the grease that kept the gears of the Dixon family reputation turning smoothly. I was the fixer, the cleaner, the silent observer, the backup plan. I was the person you called when the caterer was late, or when the dog needed to be walked in the rain, or when you needed someone to sit at the children's table so the adults could talk about important things. 3 weeks ago, at a dinner party that cost more than my entire year's rent, the invisible ink finally ran out. The story I am about to tell you is not just about revenge, although there is plenty of that coming. It is about the precise, shattering moment when you realize that the people who share your DNA are the ones holding the knife. To understand why I walked away from everything I knew, you have to understand the silence. Not the silence of an empty room, but the silence of being ignored while you are standing right there. My father, Harold Dixon, is a retired bank manager. He is a man who believes that love is a transaction, a ledger to be balanced. Affection is a reward for good behavior, and silence is a punishment for mediocrity. My mother, Patricia, has never worked a paid job in her life, yet she is busier than any CEO I have ever met. Her job is the image. She chairs the church women's committee. She organizes the neighborhood fundraisers. She maintains the facade that the Dixons are flawless. And then there is my sister, Megan. Megan is 3 years younger than me. She is the golden child, the sun around which our family orbit spins. She married Derek, a corporate attorney with a jawline that could cut glass and a personality to match. They have 2 perfect children, Oliver and Sophie, and a brand new Lexus SUV that always gets the prime spot in my parents' driveway. And then there's me, Wendy. I drive a 10-year-old Honda Civic with a dent in the rear bumper and 140,000 miles on the engine. Whenever I visited my parents' house, my mother would meet me at the door, not with a hug, but with her hand out for my keys. "Wendy," she would say, her eyes darting to the street to see if any neighbors were watching. "Move your car around the corner. Derek is coming with the Lexus, and we don't want to clutter the driveway. You know how the neighbors talk." I never questioned it. I just moved my car. That is the tragedy of being the invisible one. You stop noticing the small indignities. You stop noticing that you always get the wobbly chair at the restaurant. You stop noticing that your mother introduces your sister by her husband's job title. This is Megan. Her husband is a partner at Whitmore and Associates, while you are just, and this is Wendy. She helps out. She helps out. That was my title. Not accountant, not daughter, just, she helps out. But let me take you back to the night that changed everything. It was my parents' 40th wedding anniversary. A ruby anniversary, a milestone worthy of a coronation, according to my mother. She had been planning it for 6 months. She wanted 30 guests, the cream of their social circle, old colleagues from the bank, neighbors with immaculate lawns, the pastor from the church. The menu was catered, the wine was vintage, and the expectations were suffocating. The preparation started a week before the actual event. I took 3 days off from my job to help set up. I work as a freelance accountant, mostly for small businesses and remote clients. Because I don't wear a suit and drive to a glass tower downtown, my family thinks I don't have a real job. They treat my time as public property. "Wendy, you're free on Tuesday, right?" my mother had asked over the phone. She didn't wait for an answer. "I need you to pick up the flowers, and not from the grocery store, Wendy. Go to the florist in Back Bay. And make sure the peonies are open, but not too open. And the tablecloths need to be pressed. The delivery service left a crease I don't like." On the day of the party, I arrived at the house at 7 in the morning. The sun wasn't even fully up yet. The neighborhood was silent. I let myself in with my key, the key I was only allowed to use for emergencies or chores. The house was cold and quiet. My parents were still asleep upstairs. I started in the kitchen. I polished the silver. And when I say I polished it, I don't mean I wiped it down. I mean I sat there with the toxic-smelling paste and a microfiber cloth and rubbed until my fingers cramped, and my reflection was clearer in the serving spoons than it was in the mirror. I ironed the linen tablecloths. I set up the bar, arranging the crystal glasses in perfect rows. I organized the appetizers. I was the stagehand setting the scene for a play I wasn't allowed to star in. By noon, Megan arrived. She swept in like a weather front. She was wearing a cream-colored cashmere tracksuit that probably cost more than my monthly car payment. She held a latte in one hand and her phone in the other. She looked rested, glowing, expensive. Ugh, she sighed, dropping her designer bag on the dining table I had just spent an hour polishing. I am so exhausted. Oliver was up all night coughing. I barely slept. I looked at her. Her skin was flawless. Her hair was perfectly blown out. There were no bags under her eyes. "Do you want some coffee?" I asked, wiping my hands on my jeans. "I just made a fresh pot." "No, I can't," she said, scrolling through her phone without looking at me. "Dairy makes me bloat." "Did the caterers get the gluten-free tartlets?" "Derek is on this paleo kick, and he will be so annoyed if there's nothing he can eat." "Yes," I said. "I double-checked with the chef this morning." "Great." She looked around the kitchen, her eyes sliding over the 4 hours of work I had already done. "Mom says you're handling the kids tonight during the speeches." "I guess so," I said. "I usually do." "Thanks," she said, but she wasn't looking at me. She was taking a selfie with the flower arrangement I had spent an hour perfecting. She posted it immediately. I saw it later on Instagram. The caption read, "Anniversary prep. So much work, but worth it for Mom and Dad." She didn't tag me. She didn't mention I was standing 2 feet away, covered in silver polish. By 6 in the evening, the house looked like a magazine spread. Candles flickered on every surface. The air smelled of expensive beeswax, fresh peonies, and roasted duck. I had changed into my party outfit. It was a simple black dress I'd bought at Target 4 years ago. I pulled my hair back into a bun. I put on a little lipstick. I looked presentable. Invisible, but presentable. My mother came down the stairs. She looked regal in a navy blue silk gown. She stopped when she saw me in the hallway. Her eyes scanned me from head to toe, looking for a flaw, a loose thread, a hair out of place. "Is that what you're wearing?" she asked. "It's black," I said, smoothing the fabric nervously. "I thought it was appropriate." "It's fine, I suppose," she sniffed, adjusting her pearl earring. "Just try to stay in the background, Wendy. Tonight is about the family image. We don't want to distract the guests. And make sure the wine glasses never get below half full. You know how the pastor gets if he has to wait for a refill." "I know, Mom," I said. I knew everything. I knew how to run this house better than she did. I knew which floorboard creaked in the dining room. I knew how to get red wine out of a white rug. I knew that my father liked his scotch with 1 ice cube, not 2. The guests began arriving at 7. The doorbell rang and the performance began. My father was the charming host, shaking hands, clapping men on the back, offering drinks with a wide, benevolent smile. My mother was the gracious queen, accepting compliments on the house she didn't clean and the food she didn't cook. And Megan. Well, Megan and Derek arrived at 7:15, perfectly timed for maximum impact. They walked through the front door like celebrities on a red carpet. Megan was wearing a red Diane von Furstenberg wrap dress that hugged her in all the right places. Derek was in a charcoal-tailored suit, looking powerful and successful. Their children, Oliver and Sophie, were dressed like catalog models in matching navy and white. "Oh, look who's here!" my mother shrieked, rushing to embrace them. "My beautiful daughter, and Derek! Everyone, come say hello! Derek just made partner last year. We are so proud." Applause. Literal applause from the guests. I stood by the kitchen door holding a tray of bruschetta. I watched my mother hug Megan. I watched my father shake Derek's hand with a grip that said, This is the son I never had. I watched them coo over the grandchildren. No one hugged me. No one asked how I was. No one asked if I was tired. I circulated the room with the appetizers. I became part of the furniture. I filled glasses. I took coats. I wiped up a spill when Mrs. Gabley, the neighbor, dropped her olive on the hardwood. "Oh, thank you, dear," Mrs. Gabley said, not looking at my face. "Are you with the catering company?" I froze. I had known Mrs. Gabley since I was 10 years old. I went to school with her daughter. I had shoveled her snow for free when her husband was sick. "No, Mrs. Gabley," I said quietly. "It's me, Wendy." She squinted at me, peering through her thick glasses. "Oh, Wendy! Goodness, I didn't recognize you. You're so quiet. Well, thank you for the napkin." She turned back to her conversation without missing a beat. Around 9 o'clock, the dinner was winding down. The speeches began. My father stood at the head of the long dining table, tapping his champagne glass with a silver fork. The room fell into a hush. 30 faces turned toward him, glowing in the soft candlelight. "Patricia and I want to thank you all for being here," my father began. His voice was warm, practiced, the voice of a man used to commanding a boardroom. 40 years, it goes by in a blink. 40 years of building this home, this life, and most importantly, this family. He gestured to the table. My mother beamed, tears shimmering in her eyes. Megan reached out and squeezed Derek's hand. I stood near the sideboard, clutching a dirty dessert plate I had just cleared, trying to be as small as possible. "And," my father continued, a mischievous twinkle in his eye, "to celebrate this milestone, Patricia and I have a surprise announcement." He paused for effect. The room leaned in. The anticipation was palpable. "We decided that a party wasn't enough. We wanted to celebrate with the people who mean the most to us. So, next week, we are taking the whole family to Hawaii." The reaction was instantaneous. Gasps of delight, cheers. "1 week at the Four Seasons in Maui!" my father shouted over the applause. Sun, ocean, and family time. A second honeymoon for us, and a vacation for the kids. Megan actually squealed. "Oh my God, Dad! Are you serious?" "Dead serious, sweetheart," he grinned, raising his glass. "The kids are going to flip," Derek laughed, looking genuinely excited. My heart actually soared. For a split second, the heavy curtain of resentment and exhaustion I'd been carrying for years lifted. Hawaii, a family vacation, the whole family, he had said. I felt a rush of emotion that almost made me dizzy. I thought, maybe I was wrong. Maybe they do see me. Maybe all this work, all this silence, all the years of being the good, quiet daughter were leading to this. They want me there. They want to include me. I imagined the beach. I imagined reading a book under a palm tree, feeling the warm breeze. I imagined, just for a week, not being the help, but being a daughter. I stepped forward. I put the dirty plate down on the sideboard. I allowed myself to smile. A real, genuine smile. "That sounds incredible," I said, my voice cutting through the chatter. "I've never been to Hawaii. What time is our flight?" The room didn't just go quiet. The air left the room. My father's smile didn't disappear, but it froze. It became a mask. He looked at me, then he looked at my mother. It was a quick glance, a microscopic communication between two people who have been married for 4 decades, a look that said, "Handle this." My mother's face tightened. Her eyes, which had been sparkling a moment ago, went flat and hard. "Wendy," my father said slowly. His voice was different now. The warmth was gone. It was the voice he used to use when I failed a math test in high school. "You don't need to know the flight time." I blinked, confused. I don't understand." "You're not going, Wendy," my mother said. She didn't whisper it. She didn't pull me aside to the kitchen to spare my feelings. She said it in her clear, projection-perfect voice, right in front of the judge, the pastor, the neighbors, and the caterers. "You're not part of this trip," she continued, smoothing her napkin on her lap. "Someone has to stay behind." I felt the blood drain from my face. My hands started to tremble. "Stay behind?" "To take care of the house," she said, as if explaining gravity to a toddler. And the dogs. And honestly, Megan and Derek need a real vacation, a break. That means they can't be chasing the children around all week. So, I struggled to get the words out through the lump in my throat. So you need me to babysit? Here? While you go to Hawaii? We need you to hold down the fort, my father said, reclaiming control of the room. Family is about sacrifice, Wendy. Megan works very hard raising those children. Derek is under a lot of pressure at the firm. You know that. But you said the whole family, I whispered. Don't be difficult, my mother snapped. Her tone was sharp, warning me not to cause a scene. This is a gift we are giving to your sister. You should be happy for her. Happy for her. I looked at Megan, my sister, the girl I had shared a room with for 12 years, the girl I had protected from bullies on the playground. Surely she would say something. Surely she would say, Mom, that's not fair. Wendy works hard too. Wendy should come. Megan looked at me. She took a sip of her champagne. She shrugged, a tiny, elegant motion of her silk-clad shoulder. It's just a week, Wendy, Megan said. And honestly, you're so good with the house. I'd worry if we left it empty. Plus, you don't have, anyone waiting for you. Your schedule is flexible. You don't have anyone waiting for you. That was the sentence that did it. It wasn't just a rejection. It was an erasure. They were telling me in front of 30 witnesses that my life had no value, that my time meant nothing, that I existed solely to facilitate their happiness. Because I wasn't married, because I didn't have children, I wasn't a real person. I was a resource. I looked around the room. People were looking down at their plates. The pastor was suddenly very interested in his salad fork. Mrs. Gabley looked pained. They saw it. They all saw the cruelty of it, but no one said a word. No one stood up for me. Right, I said. My voice sounded hollow, like it was coming from underwater. Of course, I understand. Good, my father said, clapping his hands together as if sealing a business deal. Now, who wants cake? I spent the next hour in the kitchen. I washed the dishes. I scraped the leftover duck into the trash. I stacked the rental plates. I moved like a robot. I didn't cry. I think I was in shock. The humiliation was so absolute it numbed me. Megan came in once. She didn't apologize. She came to give me instructions. So, she said, scrolling on her phone, leaning against the counter I had just sanitized, Derek made a list for the house. And for the kids, obviously, if you're watching them when we get back. Oh wait, no, Mom said you're just watching the house this time? Whatever, I'll text you the alarm code just in case. Okay, I said. I didn't look up from the sink. I kept scrubbing a pot that was already clean. Don't be sulky, Wendy, she sighed, rolling her eyes. It's really unattractive. We'll bring you back a souvenir, maybe some macadamia nuts or something. She walked out in a cloud of expensive perfume, leaving me alone with the dirty dishes. By midnight, the guests were finally gone. My parents went upstairs, complaining about how their feet hurt, basking in the glow of their successful evening. They didn't say goodnight to me. They just assumed I would finish cleaning and lock up. I was alone downstairs. The house was quiet. I was supposed to finish folding the napkins, turn out the lights, and go home. I saw my mother's laptop sitting on the kitchen island. It was open. The screen was dark, but the power light was blinking. I needed to check my email. I had a client who was expecting a tax file that I hadn't sent because I had been too busy slicing lemons for my mother's gin and tonics. I tapped the spacebar to wake the computer up. It didn't ask for a password. It opened right to Safari, right to my mother's Gmail. I should have closed it. I was raised to respect privacy. I was raised to be the good girl. But then I saw my name. It was the third email down, a thread between Patricia Dixon and Megan Hartley. Subject, Hawaii Logistics/Wendy situation. My finger hovered over the trackpad. My heart was hammering against my ribs like a trapped bird. I knew I shouldn't look. I knew that whatever was in that email was going to hurt more than the dinner. I clicked anyway. The email was dated 1 week ago, from Patricia to Megan. Don't worry about the childcare for the trip. Your father and I discussed it. We're not taking Wendy. We're going to tell her at the party that she has to stay behind. It's better this way. If she comes, she'll just mope around and bring down the mood. She doesn't fit in at the Four Seasons, frankly. Plus, Derek was right. Leaving her here is like having free help for the house. She doesn't have anything important to do anyway. We should be grateful we give her a purpose. I read it twice. Free help. She doesn't fit in. Give her a purpose. Then I scrolled down to see Megan's reply. Totally agree, Mom. It would be awkward with her there as a fifth wheel. And honestly, it's kind of sad how desperate she is to be included, but at least it works out for us. Just make sure you break the news publicly so she can't make a scene or try to argue. She never argues in front of people. I stopped breathing. The air in the kitchen felt suddenly thin. They hadn't just excluded me. They had strategized it. They had weaponized my own politeness against me. They knew I wouldn't fight back in public, so they staged the ambush for the party. They had mocked me. It's kind of sad. I felt something crack in my chest. It wasn't a heartbreak. It was something louder. It was the sound of a bridge collapsing. The bridge that connected me to them. I took out my phone. My hands were shaking so badly I dropped it once. I picked it up and took clear, high-resolution photos of the emails. I took photos of the dates, the headers, the text. Then I went to the sent folder and deleted the evidence of my snooping. I closed the browser. I wiped my fingerprints off the laptop. I stood in that beautiful, expensive kitchen for one last moment. I looked at the marble countertops I had cleaned 1,000 times. I looked at the family photos on the fridge, photos of Megan, photos of the grandkids, photos of my parents on vacation. There wasn't a single photo of me, not one. I turned off the lights, and I walked out the door. I drove back to my apartment. It was 1 a.m. The streets were empty. My apartment was nothing like my parents' house. It was a 1-bedroom unit in a beige complex that smelled like old carpet and boiled cabbage. My mother hated it. She called it depressing. I sat on my second-hand couch in the dark. I didn't turn on the lamps. I just sat there, listening to the hum of the refrigerator, letting the rage boil in my blood. They thought I had nothing important to do. They thought I was empty. But they were wrong. I had a secret. 3 years ago, my life had fallen apart in a different way. My fiancé, Kevin, had left me. He told me the same thing my family implied, that I was boring, that I was just there. After he left, I felt like I was disappearing. I wandered into a pawn shop downtown, looking for something to anchor me. I found a camera, a Canon DSLR, scratched, used, but functional. I bought it for $180. That camera became my voice. I started walking the city at dawn. I took photos of the people the world ignores, the janitors smoking cigarettes in alleyways at 5 a.m, the elderly women waiting for buses that never came, the calloused hands of the checkout girl at the grocery store. I saw them, because I was them. I started an anonymous Instagram account called Invisible Women. I didn't tell my family. I didn't tell my friends. It was mine. Over 3 years, I gained 12,000 followers, people who felt seen by my work. And 3 weeks ago, I had received an email from a man named Marcus Coleman. He owned a gallery in Carmel by the Sea, California, Coastal Light Gallery. He had seen my work online. He wanted to give me a show, a solo exhibition. I hadn't replied. I was too scared. I told myself, Wendy, you can't go to California. You have clients. You have to help Mom with the anniversary party. You have responsibilities. You can't leave your family. I looked at my phone now, glowing in the dark room. I pulled up the email from Marcus. Subject, still hoping to hear from you. I looked at the photos of my mother's emails. Free help. I stood up. The fear was still there, but the anger was hotter. I dialed the only person in the world who knew the real me, Aunt Ruth. Ruth was my mother's sister, but they hadn't spoken properly in 20 years. Ruth was the black sheep. She had moved to California to open a pottery studio. My mother called her a failure. I called her every Sunday night in secret. Wendy? Ruth answered on the second ring. Her voice was raspy with sleep. It's late. Is everything okay? No, I said. My voice was steady, terrifyingly steady. They're going to Hawaii. They told me tonight, in front of everyone, that I can't go because I have to stay and watch the house. Oh, honey, Ruth sighed. I told you, Patricia is a scorpion. She will always sting. I saw emails, Ruth. They planned it. They called me free help. They laughed about it. Silence on the line. I could hear the ocean in the background of her call, or maybe I just imagined it. So, Ruth said softly, what are you going to do? Are you going to stay there and water her plants? Are you going to move your car for the rest of your life? No, I said. I'm done. Good. I could hear the smile in her voice. Then come here. Marcus asked about you again yesterday. He says your talent is rare, Wendy. He wants to meet you. California is 3,000 miles away, I said, the old fear creeping in. So drive fast, Ruth said. I have a spare room above the cafe. It has a view of the water. It's yours. Just leave. Pack your car and leave. Don't ask for permission. Just go. I hung up the phone. I didn't sleep. I pulled my suitcases out of the closet. I packed my clothes. I packed my laptop. I packed my Canon camera and my lenses, wrapping them carefully in my sweaters. I looked around the apartment. The beige carpet. The walls I wasn't allowed to paint. This wasn't a home. It was a waiting room. I had been waiting my whole life for my family to love me. I was done waiting. I wrote a check for 2 months' rent. I put it in an envelope with my spare key and slid it under the landlord's door. I didn't write a note for my family. Why should I? They had a schedule for the house. That's all they cared about. At 4:30 in the morning, the sky was turning a bruised purple over Boston. The air was cold. I carried the last box to my car, my Honda Civic, the car my mother was ashamed of. I sat in the driver's seat. The engine turned over with a reliable hum. I took out my phone one last time. I opened my contacts. Megan, block caller. Mom, block caller. Dad, block caller. Derek, block caller. I threw the phone onto the passenger seat. I put the car in drive. As I pulled onto the Mass Pike, heading west, I felt a strange sensation in my chest. It wasn't happiness. Not yet. It was lighter than that. It was the feeling of a prisoner walking through an open gate. The drive took 5 days. I could have done it faster, but I needed the time. I needed to decompress 32 years of pressure. I drove through New York, Ohio, Indiana. I watched the world change from cramped, gray cities to endless fields of corn that waved in the wind like a golden ocean. I stayed in cheap motels with neon signs that buzzed all night. I ate at roadside diners where the waitresses called me honey and poured coffee without asking. No one knew who I was. No one knew I was a disappointment. I was just a woman in a car with a camera. Somewhere in Nebraska, I pulled over at a rest stop. The sun was setting, painting the prairie in unreal shades of violet and fire. I got out of the car. The wind whipped my hair across my face. It was silent, except for the distant hum of trucks on the highway. I picked up my camera. I framed the shot. The empty road, the vast sky, the feeling of total, terrifying isolation. Click. I looked at the image on the small screen. It was good. It was real. For the first time in my life, I wasn't taking a picture of what someone else wanted me to see. I was seeing for myself. On the 4th day, I crossed into Arizona. The landscape turned alien. Red rocks, giant cactus, heat that shimmered off the asphalt. My phone had been silent because I had blocked them all, but when I stopped for gas in Flagstaff, I had a moment of weakness. I checked my blocked messages folder. There were 42 messages. Mom, where are you? The dog walker didn't show up. Mom, Wendy, answer me. This is childish. Megan, did you pick up the dry cleaning? Derek needs his suit for the trip. Dad, this is unacceptable behavior. Call us immediately. And then, one from Megan, sent 2 hours ago. Megan, Mom is freaking out. She says if you're not here when we get back from Hawaii, don't bother coming back. You're dead to us. I read it. You're dead to us. I looked at the red rocks of Arizona. I looked at my reflection in the gas station window. I looked tired. My hair was messy. My clothes were wrinkled. But my eyes were clear. "I'm already dead to you," I whispered to the phone. "I've been dead to you for years." I deleted the messages. I didn't reply. On the evening of the 5th day, the smell of the air changed. The dry heat of the desert gave way to something cool, damp, and salty. The Pacific. I rolled down the windows. I let the wind hit my face. I drove through the winding roads of Carmel, past the cypress trees that twisted toward the sky like sculptures. The fog was rolling in, wrapping the world in a soft gray blanket. I pulled up to the ceramic cup. It was exactly as Ruth had described it, a cottage straight out of a fairy tale, with blue shutters and window boxes overflowing with lavender. A sign hanging out front squeaked gently in the breeze. The front door opened. Aunt Ruth stepped out. She was wearing clay-spattered overalls, and her silver hair was tied up in a messy bun. She looked nothing like my mother. She looked free. I turned off the engine. The silence of the car was deafening after 5 days of road noise. I opened the door and stepped out. My legs felt shaky. Ruth didn't say anything. She just opened her arms. I walked into her embrace and I collapsed. I didn't cry. I just let go. I let her hold me up. She smelled like wet earth and coffee. "You made it," she whispered into my ear. "I made it," I said. "Welcome home, Wendy." Home. It was a word I had used 1,000 times, but I realized in that moment I had never actually known what it meant. She led me upstairs to the room above the cafe. It was small. The floorboards creaked, but there was a bed with a white quilt and a desk facing the window. I walked to the window. The sun was gone, but the moon was full, casting a silver path across the ocean. The waves crashed against the rocks below, a rhythmic, eternal sound. "Sleep," Ruth said, standing in the doorway. "Tomorrow, we go to the gallery. Marcus is expecting you." "Tomorrow?" I asked, panic flaring up. "I haven't showered. I haven't prepared." "Tomorrow," she said firmly. "You've waited 32 years. You're not waiting another day." I lay down on the bed. I listened to the ocean. Back in Boston, it was 3 in the morning. My parents were probably sleeping in their perfect beds, dreaming of their trip to Hawaii. They didn't know yet. They thought I was just being difficult. They thought I was sulking in my apartment. They had no idea that the ghost had left the building. They had no idea that when they woke up, the house would be empty, the free help would be gone, and their perfect world was about to crumble. I closed my eyes, and for the first time in my life, I didn't dream about forgetting to set the table. I dreamed about the sea, and in the dream, I was swimming. The first morning in Carmel by the Sea did not start with an alarm clock. It started with the light. In Boston, the morning light was always gray and hurried, filtering through the blinds I kept closed to hide from the neighbors. But here, the light was gold. It poured through the window of the spare room, smelling of salt and eucalyptus. I lay in the bed for a long time, staring at the ceiling. My body was tense, waiting for the shout. I was waiting for my mother to call my name from the bottom of the stairs. I was waiting for the vibration of my phone, demanding to know where the dry cleaning was. I was waiting for the familiar, crushing weight of being Wendy, the helper. But the shout never came. The phone did not buzz. There was only the sound of seagulls and the distant, rhythmic thrum of the Pacific Ocean. I sat up. I looked at my hands. They were the same hands that had scrubbed my mother's floors and folded my sister's laundry for a decade. But they looked different here. They looked like they belonged to me. I went downstairs. Aunt Ruth was already in the cafe, moving with a chaotic grace behind the counter. The air smelled of roasted coffee beans and cinnamon. "Good morning," she said, not looking up from the espresso machine. "There is coffee in the pot. Drink it black, drink it with sugar, I don't care. Just drink it while it's hot." I poured a cup. I walked out onto the porch. I sat on a wooden bench and watched the town of Carmel wake up. It was a storybook town. Cottages with rolled eaves, hidden courtyards, art galleries on every corner. People walked their dogs slowly here. No one was rushing. No one was performing. At 2 p.m., I showered and put on the nicest clothes I had packed, a navy blue wrap dress and sandals. I brushed my hair until it shone. I grabbed my portfolio case, a battered leather binder that held the physical prints of my Invisible Women series. Ruth walked with me. The gallery, Coastal Light, was 3 blocks away. "You're nervous," Ruth said, noticing the way I was gripping the handle of the portfolio. "I feel like a fraud," I admitted. "I feel like a child playing dress-up. They're going to look at my photos and laugh. They're going to tell me to go back to doing taxes." "Let them look first," Ruth said. "Then you can panic." We turned the corner and there it was, Coastal Light Gallery. It was beautiful. Large glass windows displaying abstract paintings and bronze sculptures. It looked expensive. It looked like a place where people whispered. A bell chimed as we pushed open the door. The interior was flooded with natural light. The floors were polished concrete, and standing behind a sleek white desk was Marcus Coleman. He looked nothing like I expected. I had imagined a shark in a suit, someone like my brother-in-law Derek. But Marcus was older, perhaps 60, with messy silver hair and a linen shirt with the sleeves rolled up. He looked like a man who spent his weekends painting on a beach. "Ruth!" he exclaimed, coming around the desk. "And this must be the elusive Wendy." He held out a hand. I took it. His grip was warm and firm. "It is nice to meet you," I said. My voice was small. "I have been waiting for this," Marcus said. He gestured to a large table in the center of the room. "Please, lay them out." My hands were shaking as I unzipped the portfolio. I pulled out the prints, 15 photographs, black and white. The first one was the janitor. He was sitting on a bucket in an alleyway, smoking a cigarette, his eyes closed in a moment of pure exhaustion. The second was the woman at the bus stop. Her coat was threadbare, her posture resigned, waiting for a bus that was already late. The third was a close-up of a waitress's hands, swollen and scarred, counting change on a diner counter. I laid them out one by one. Marcus didn't say a word. He walked around the table. He leaned in close. He took his glasses off and put them back on. The silence stretched for what felt like an hour. I wanted to throw up. I wanted to grab the photos, run back to my car, and drive until I hit the Atlantic Ocean. Then, Marcus stopped in front of the photo of the bus stop woman. "Do you know why this is good?" he asked without looking at me. I liked the lighting," I stammered. "It is not the lighting," he said. "Anyone can learn lighting. You can teach lighting to a monkey." He turned to look at me. His eyes were intense. "It is the empathy, Wendy. You didn't just take a picture of a woman waiting for a bus. You took a picture of waiting. You captured the specific tragedy of being overlooked. You made us look at her. You made us see her." I felt tears prick the corners of my eyes. "Most photographers," Marcus continued, "they want to capture beauty, or they want to capture shock. You capture the invisible. It is a very rare gift, and it is exactly what I am looking for." He walked back to his desk and picked up a folder. "I want to offer you a solo exhibition," he said. 6 weeks. Opening night is in 1 month. We will frame them, we will hang them, and we will sell them." "Sell them?" I repeated. "Yes," Marcus smiled. "People pay for art, Wendy." He handed me the contract. I read it. The numbers swam before my eyes. A 60-40 split. The gallery would take 40%, I would keep 60%. The estimated price for each print was set at $2,000. $2,000? I squeaked. "For one photo?" Marcus laughed. "That is the starting price. If the show goes well, the value goes up." I signed the contract. My hand shook so bad the signature looked like a seismograph reading of an earthquake. But I signed it. Wendy Dixon, artist. When we left the gallery, I felt lightheaded. I felt like I had just stepped off a roller coaster. "We are celebrating," Ruth announced. "Champagne and oysters." We sat at a bistro by the ocean. I drank champagne at 4 in the afternoon. I ate oysters that tasted like the sea. And for the first time in 32 years, I didn't check my phone. But while I was drinking champagne in California, my old life in Boston was beginning to burn. I didn't witness the fallout firsthand, of course. I pieced it together later. I pieced it together from the voicemail transcripts, from the frantic texts I eventually read, and from the stories my cousin told me months later. Here is what happened when the invisible daughter disappeared. The morning after the anniversary party, my parents woke up with a hangover. Not just from the wine, but from the adoration. They were high on their own success. They expected to come downstairs to a clean kitchen, fresh coffee, and a silent, compliant Wendy waiting for instructions. Instead, they found a dark kitchen. The coffee pot was cold. The dishwasher had not been unloaded. My mother, Patricia, was annoyed. She assumed I had overslept. She assumed I was being passive-aggressive. She called my cell phone. It went straight to voicemail. She called again. Voicemail. She called the house line at my apartment. No answer. By noon, the annoyance had turned into indignation. How dare I? How dare I ignore her after she had so graciously allowed me to attend her party? Megan dropped by around 1 o'clock to drop off the kids so she could go get a manicure before the trip. "Where's Wendy?" Megan asked, looking around the kitchen. "Sophie needs her lunch." "I don't know," my mother snapped. "She isn't answering her phone. She probably turned it off to punish us. She is so dramatic." They waited. They waited all day. They fed the kids cereal because neither of them wanted to cook. They let the dog out in the backyard and forgot about him until he started barking at the neighbors. It wasn't until the next day, 2 days before the Hawaii trip, that the panic set in. Derek came over. He needed his tax returns. I had been working on them for weeks. They were on my laptop, which was currently in the trunk of my car in Nebraska. "I need those files," Derek said, pacing the living room. "The filing deadline is next week. Wendy has the only copies." They drove to my apartment. They had a spare key, of course. I had given it to them for emergencies. They let themselves in, expecting to find me sulking in bed. They found an empty apartment. They found the bare walls. They found the closets stripped of clothes. They found the refrigerator empty except for a jar of old mustard. They found the check for the rent on the counter. But they didn't find a note. My mother apparently sat down on my second-hand beige couch and just stared at the wall. She couldn't process it. In her world, people didn't just leave, especially not me. I was the furniture. Furniture doesn't get up and walk away. "She took the silver," Megan whispered, looking at the empty drawers in the kitchen. I hadn't taken the silver. I had taken my own silverware, which I had bought at Goodwill 5 years ago. But to them, everything I had was theirs. "She's gone," my father said. He checked the closet again. "Her suitcases are gone." "But the trip," my mother whispered. "Who is going to watch the house?" That was their first reaction. Not, "Is she safe?" Not, "Is she okay?" But, "Who is going to watch the house?" They called the police. They tried to file a missing persons report. The officer asked them how old I was. 32, my father said. "Is she mentally incapacitated?" the officer asked. "No." "Is there any sign of a struggle?" "No, her clothes are just gone." "Sir," the officer said, likely rolling his eyes, "it sounds like your daughter just moved." "She is an adult. She is allowed to leave." They had to go back to the house. The Hawaii trip was in 24 hours. And this is where the tragedy turned into a comedy. Without me to organize the logistics, the trip began to fall apart before they even reached the airport. I was the one who always checked in for the flights online 24 hours in advance to secure the seats together. They forgot. When they got to Logan Airport, the flight was overbooked. They were separated. Megan and Derek got seats in row 30. My parents were in row 12. The kids were seated separately from everyone, next to a stranger who apparently smelled like tuna fish. I was the one who always printed the itinerary and the hotel confirmations. They arrived in Maui, and the shuttle driver asked for their reservation number. No one had it. They stood on the curb in the heat for an hour, while Derek yelled at someone on the phone. I was the one who packed the emergency kit. When Sophie got an ear infection on day 3, just like I knew she would, Megan didn't have the drops. She didn't have the pediatrician's number. She called me. I didn't answer. She had to take Sophie to an urgent care clinic in a strip mall, waiting for 4 hours while Sophie screamed. And then there was the house. They had left the house in Wellesley empty. They assumed, arrogantly, that I would eventually come back and check on it. They didn't hire a house sitter. 3 days into their trip, a pipe burst in the upstairs bathroom. Usually, I would have been there. I would have heard the drip. I would have called the plumber. I would have cleaned it up. But I wasn't there. The water ran for 2 days. It soaked through the floorboards. It ruined the dining room ceiling. It destroyed the antique Persian rug in the foyer. The neighbor, Mrs. Gabley, finally noticed water seeping out from under the front door. She called my parents in Hawaii. I can only imagine the scene. My mother, sitting by the pool with a watered-down Mai Tai, complaining about the service, answering her phone to hear that her pristine, perfect sanctuary was flooding. They had to fly home early. They cut the trip of a lifetime short. They came back to a house that smelled of mold and wet drywall. They came back to thousands of dollars in damage. And they had no one to blame but themselves. But of course, they blamed me. Back in Carmel, I was oblivious to the water damage. I was busy building a life. For the next month, I worked. I woke up at dawn. I worked the morning shift at the cafe with Ruth. I learned to make a perfect cappuccino. I learned how to chat with the regulars. There was Mr. Henderson, a retired professor who read poetry and tipped $5 every day. There was Sarah, a young surfer who always came in barefoot. They didn't know I was the family scapegoat. They just knew me as Wendy, the woman with the nice smile and the good coffee. In the afternoons, I went to the gallery. Marcus was teaching me. He taught me how to frame my photos. He taught me about paper stock and matte finishes. He taught me how to talk about my art without apologizing. "Stop saying I think," Marcus told me one day. "Don't say I think this photo represents loneliness. Say, this photo represents loneliness. You are the artist. You are the authority." It was a hard habit to break. I had spent my life apologizing for taking up space. Now, I was being asked to fill a room. I chose the title for the exhibition, Unseen. It felt right. It was about the subjects of my photos, but it was also about me. One afternoon, a week before the opening, I was in the studio at the back of the gallery. I was signing the limited edition prints. My phone was on the table. I had finally unblocked my family, mostly out of a morbid curiosity, but also because I needed to know if they were still alive. The phone buzzed. It was a text from Megan. "We're home. The house is ruined. Dad says the insurance won't cover all the mold damage because nobody was checking on the property. This is your fault. How could you do this to us?" I stared at the message. A month ago, that text would have sent me into a spiral of guilt. I would have apologized. I would have offered to pay for it, even if I didn't have the money. But now? I looked at the photo I was signing. It was a picture of a young girl looking through a chain-link fence. She looked strong. I picked up the phone. I typed a reply. "I didn't break the pipe, Megan. And I don't work for you. I suggest you call a contractor. I hear they charge extra for mold." I hit send. Then I put the phone down and went back to work. The night before the opening, I couldn't sleep. I sat on the roof of the cafe, wrapped in a blanket, watching the stars. Ruth climbed out the window to join me. She had 2 mugs of hot chocolate. "Tomorrow is the big day," she said, sitting beside me. "I'm terrified," I admitted. "What if nobody comes? What if they come and they hate it?" "They will come," Ruth said. "Marcus has invited the entire art community of Monterey, and Mrs. Peyton is coming." "Mrs. Peyton?" "She's a collector," Ruth said. "She has more money than God and less patience. If she likes your work, your career is made. If she doesn't, well, the coffee is still good." I laughed. It felt good to laugh. "Wendy," Ruth said, her voice turning serious, "you know they might find you, right? You used your real name for the show. The press release is online." I stiffened. I hadn't thought about that. "Let them find me," I said, surprised by my own bravery. "I'm not hiding anymore. If they want to find me, let them come. They can buy a ticket like everyone else." The opening night arrived. I wore a black dress, but not the cheap one from Target. This one was silk. It was vintage. Ruth had found it for me at a thrift store. It moved like water when I walked. I wore heels. I put on red lipstick. When I looked in the mirror, I didn't recognize myself. The woman looking back wasn't the invisible daughter. She was sharp. She was defined. She was visible. The gallery was full. People were drinking wine and eating tiny crab cakes. The string quartet was playing something elegant. I stood near the entrance, greeting guests. My heart was hammering, but I kept my head high. Marcus was working the room. He was in his element. He grabbed my elbow and steered me toward a woman in a tweed suit with a face made of granite. "Wendy, this is Mrs. Peyton." Mrs. Peyton looked at me. Then she looked at the wall behind me, where the photo of the bus stop woman was hanging. She stared at it for a long time. She took a sip of her wine. "How much?" she asked. "The price is listed on the wall," Marcus said smoothly. "$2,000. "I'll take it," she said, "and the one of the hands, and the janitor." My mouth fell open. 3 photos, $6,000, in 30 seconds. "You have an eye, girl," Mrs. Peyton said to me. "You see the sadness. Most people look away from sadness. You stare right at it. Don't lose that." She walked away. I stood there, stunned. I had just made more money in a minute than I used to make in 2 months of accounting. I wanted to find Ruth. I wanted to celebrate. I turned toward the bar, and that's when the air in the room changed. It wasn't a sound. It was a shift in the energy. The chatter near the door died down. People were moving aside, creating a path. I turned to look at the entrance, and there they were. It was like a hallucination. My parents, and Megan, and Derek, they looked out of place. They looked like tourists who had taken a wrong turn. My mother was wearing her trench coat, clutching her purse like a weapon. My father looked red-faced and angry. Megan looked tired, her roots showing, holding a baby bag. They stood in the doorway of my gallery, scanning the room with predatory eyes. They weren't here to celebrate. They weren't here to buy art. They had found the website. They had seen the address. And they had flown 3,000 miles not to congratulate me, but to reclaim their property. My mother's eyes locked onto mine across the room. She didn't smile. She didn't wave. She started walking toward me, her heels clicking on the concrete floor like a countdown. I felt a cold shiver run down my spine. The old Wendy, the ghost, wanted to run. She wanted to hide in the bathroom. She wanted to apologize for being successful. But the new Wendy, the artist, she stood her ground. I took a sip of my champagne. I squared my shoulders. Marcus stepped up beside me. He saw them coming. "Trouble?" he asked quietly. "Family," I said. "Same thing," he replied. My mother stopped 3 feet in front of me. She looked at the silk dress. She looked at the red lipstick. She looked at the red dot sticker next to the photo Mrs. Peyton had just bought. "Wendy," she said. Her voice was ice. "Hello, Mother," I said. "You have caused us a lot of trouble," she hissed. "The house is a disaster. Your father is furious. We have been worried sick." "You don't look worried," I said calmly. "You look annoyed." Megan stepped up. She looked frantic. "Wendy, you have to come home, now. I'm pregnant again. I can't handle the kids and the pregnancy and the house damage. You have to come back and help." I looked at them. I looked at these people who claimed to be my blood. They stood in the middle of my triumph, surrounded by my soul on the walls, and they didn't see any of it. They didn't see the art. They didn't see the crowd. They only saw a missing appliance. They only saw a vacancy that needed to be filled. Mrs. Peyton, who had been watching from nearby, stepped closer. She held her wine glass like a scepter. "Excuse me," she said, her voice carrying that distinct tone of old money authority. "Is there a problem here?" My father puffed up his chest. "This is a family matter. We are taking our daughter home. She is having a mental breakdown." Mrs. Peyton looked at me. Then she looked at my father. She let out a dry, sharp laugh. "A mental breakdown?" she asked. "Sir, your daughter just sold $6,000 worth of art in 5 minutes. If that is a breakdown, I wish I had one." My father blinked. 6,000? I looked at my mother. I saw the calculation in her eyes. The shift. Suddenly, I wasn't just the help. I was an asset again. A profitable asset. "Wendy," my mother said, her voice softening into that fake sweetness I knew so well. Darling, that's wonderful. We can talk about the money later, but right now you need to come with us. The car is outside. I looked at the door. I looked at Marcus, who was ready to call security. I looked at Ruth, who was watching me with pride, and then I looked at my mother. "No," I said. The room went silent. "Excuse me?" my mother asked. I said no, I repeated, my voice ringing clear and strong. "I'm not going anywhere. I'm not the help. I'm not the house sitter. I am an artist. And this," I gestured to the gallery, to the people, to the life I had built. "This is my family now." My mother's face turned a color I had never seen before, purple, mottled with rage. "You are ungrateful," she spat. "After everything we gave you." "You gave me nothing," I said. "You gave me a roof so I could fix it. You gave me food so I could cook it. You didn't raise a daughter, you raised a servant, and the servant has resigned." Derek stepped forward, looking like he was about to grab my arm. "Wendy, be reasonable." "Don't touch her," Marcus said. His voice was low, dangerous, "or you will be leaving in handcuffs." Derek froze. He looked around. He realized for the first time that he wasn't in his world. He wasn't the powerful lawyer here. He was just an intruder in a room full of people who adored me. "Get out," I said. "Wendy." Megan started to cry. Real tears? Fake tears? It didn't matter anymore. "Get out." I pointed to the door. My father looked at me. He looked at the red dot on the wall. He looked at the check Marcus was holding. He realized he had lost. He had bet against me, and he had lost everything. "Come on, Patricia," he muttered, grabbing my mother's arm. "She's crazy. Let's go." My mother looked at me one last time. There was no love in her eyes, only hate. Pure, distilled hate for the mirror I was holding up to her. "You'll fail," she whispered. "You'll be back." "Watch me," I said. They turned and walked out. The heavy glass door swung shut behind them. The silence in the gallery held for 1 second, 2 seconds. Then, Mrs. Peyton started to clap. Slowly at first, then louder. Then Marcus joined in. Then Ruth. Then the whole room. They weren't clapping for the photos. They were clapping for the exorcism. I stood there, trembling, tears finally spilling down my cheeks. But I wasn't crying because I was sad. I was crying because I was free. But as I watched my family get into their rental car through the window, I knew it wasn't over. My mother was not a woman who accepted defeat. She was a woman who sought revenge. And as I would find out the next morning, she had one last card to play, a card that could destroy everything I had just built. I closed my eyes, and for the first time in my life, I didn't dream about forgetting to set the table. I dreamed about the sea, and in the dream, I was swimming. The morning after the gallery opening, I woke up with a headache, but it was the best headache of my life. It was a champagne headache. It was a victory headache. I lay in my bed in the room above the cafe, listening to the seagulls, and for the first time, I didn't feel the crushing weight of dread that usually greeted me in the morning. I rolled over and looked at my phone. There were emails from Marcus. There were notifications from Instagram. My follower count had jumped by 3,000 overnight. There was a digital receipt from the gallery system showing the final tally of the night's sales. $14,000. In one night, I had earned enough to pay my rent for a year. I had earned enough to buy a car that wasn't embarrassing. But more than that, I had earned my freedom. I went downstairs. Ruth was already there, humming as she unloaded the dishwasher. She looked at me and grinned. "The conquering hero returns," she said. "Coffee is ready, and Marcus called. Mrs. Peyton wants to commission a portrait of her granddaughter." I leaned against the counter, wrapping my hands around the warm mug. It felt surreal. It felt like I was wearing someone else's life. "They're gone, right?" I asked, my voice a little shaky. "They flew back?" Ruth stopped humming. She wiped her hands on her apron and looked at me. Her expression was serious. "They left the gallery, Wendy, but I don't think they left town. I saw a rental car driving slow past the cafe this morning, a silver sedan." My stomach dropped. The champagne headache suddenly felt less like a trophy and more like a warning. "They wouldn't stay," I reasoned. Dad hates hotels. He hates spending money on things he can't control. They probably just got lost on the way to the airport. Ruth didn't look convinced. Patricia isn't the type to walk away from a fight, she said, especially not a public one. You embarrassed her, Wendy. To a woman like your mother, embarrassment is a declaration of war. I tried to shake it off. I told myself I was being paranoid. I told myself that I was an adult, a successful artist, and that they couldn't touch me here. This was California. This was my turf. For 2 days, nothing happened. I went to the gallery. I signed prints. I met with the journalist from Carmel magazine, a sharp-eyed woman named Susan who wanted to write a feature about the mysterious photographer from the East Coast. I started to relax. I started to believe that maybe, just maybe, I had won. But on the 3rd day, the other shoe dropped. And it didn't drop softly. It crashed through the ceiling. I was at the gallery, discussing framing options with Marcus, when a courier walked in. He wasn't a casual delivery guy. He was wearing a uniform that screamed legal process. "Wendy Dixon?" he asked. "Yes?" He handed me a thick, heavy envelope. "Served," he said. He turned and walked out. I stared at the envelope. My name was typed on the front in bold, aggressive letters. The return address was a law firm in Monterey. "Open it," Marcus said quietly. My hands were shaking so badly I tore the paper. I pulled out a stack of documents. Superior Court of California, Civil Division. Plaintiff, Harold and Patricia Dixon. Defendant, Wendy Dixon. I read the first page, then the second. The room started to spin. The white walls of the gallery seemed to close in on me. "What is it?" Marcus asked. "They're suing me," I whispered. "On what grounds?" I read the allegations aloud. My voice sounded thin and high, like a child's. Theft of property. They claim the camera I used to take the photos belongs to them because it was purchased with family funds. "That's a lie," I said, looking up at Marcus. "I bought it at a pawn shop with my own money. I have the receipt somewhere." "Keep reading," Marcus said grimly. "Defamation of character," I continued, "intentional infliction of emotional distress, and—" I stopped. The last paragraph was the one that made my blood run cold. "They are filing for an emergency injunction to freeze the proceeds of the gallery sales, claiming that the defendant, me, is mentally unstable and has been coerced by a third party into exploiting family resources." "Coerced," Marcus scoffed. "By whom? Me?" "I suppose so," I said, "or Ruth." I sank into the chair behind the desk. The document was a masterpiece of manipulation. It painted a picture of a confused, mentally fragile young woman who had been lured away from her loving family by a cult-like group of artists who were stealing her inheritance. It claimed that the Invisible Women series was a violation of the family's privacy, even though none of the photos featured them. It was insane. It was a fabrication, but it was a fabrication on legal letterhead. "They frozen the money?" I asked. Marcus picked up the phone. He called the gallery's bank. He listened for a moment, his face darkening. Then he hung up. "They filed a temporary restraining order on the funds," he said. "The bank has locked the account pending a hearing. Wendy, you can't access the $14,000. I put my head in my hands. "She did it," I whispered. "She actually did it. She couldn't control me, so she decided to starve me. She knows I don't have savings. She knows I can't afford a lawyer to fight this. She wants to bleed me dry until I have to crawl back to Boston and ask for forgiveness." I felt the old panic rising. The panic of the little girl who forgot to defrost the chicken. The panic of the teenager who got a B-. The conditioning ran deep. My brain immediately started telling me to surrender. "Just apologize. Just go home. It's easier." Marcus slammed his hand down on the desk. The sound made me jump. "No," he said. I looked at him. "We do not fold," Marcus said. "I have a lawyer, a shark. He eats people like your parents for breakfast." "But I can't pay him," I said. "I will pay him," Marcus said. "We will countersue. We will prove the camera is yours. We will prove you are sane." "It will take months," I said. "Years." "They have money, Marcus. My father has a retirement fund that could keep this going forever. They will drag this out until I'm broken. I stood up. I walked to the window. I looked out at the street. I half expected to see the silver rental car parked there, my mother watching me through the tinted glass, waiting for me to crumble. She wants a war, I said softly. Then give her a war, Marcus said. No, I said. I turned around. The fear was gone. In its place was something cold and hard, a diamond of clarity. She doesn't want a war, Marcus. She wants a spanking. She wants to discipline a child. She thinks this is private. She thinks she can bully me in a courtroom and no one will know the truth. She cares about one thing more than money, more than me, more than anything. What? Marcus asked. Her reputation, I said. The image, the neighbors, the church committee. I looked at the legal papers. Then I looked at my phone, where the contact info for Susan, the journalist from Carmel magazine, was saved. She wants to sue me for defamation? I said. Let's give her something to complain about. I picked up my phone. Marcus, I said, call Susan. Tell her I'm ready to do the interview, and tell her I'm bringing receipts. The interview took place the next morning on the patio of the cafe. Susan sat across from me with a tape recorder and a notepad. She looked at the stack of papers I had placed on the table. This is off the record? She asked. No, I said. This is on the record. All of it. I told her everything. I didn't tell her the polite version. I didn't tell her the artist finding herself version. I told her the truth. I told her about the years of servitude. I told her about the car I had to park down the street. I told her about the anniversary party. I told her about the announcement in front of 30 people. I told her about the free help comment. And then I showed her the emails. I had printed the screenshots I took that night in the kitchen, the timestamps, the headers, the cruel, casual way my mother and sister had discussed my life, as if I were a piece of malfunctioning equipment. Susan read the emails. Her eyebrows shot up. It's like having free help, she read aloud. She should be grateful we give her a purpose. She looked at me. This is brutal, Wendy. It's the truth, I said. They are suing me for defamation. They claim I am lying about why I left. They claim I am mentally unstable. These emails prove that I was lucid, I was exploited, and I left because I finally woke up. Susan tapped her pen on the table. You know, she said, if I run this, if I include these details, this isn't just a local art puff piece anymore. This is a story about family dynamics, about emotional abuse, about the price of independence. This will go viral. Good, I said. Are you sure? Susan asked. Once it's out, you can't take it back. They will be exposed. Their friends will see this, their neighbors. I thought about Mrs. Gabley. I thought about the pastor. I thought about the way my mother preened when people told her what a perfect family she had. I am sure, I said. Print it. The article came out 3 days later. The headline was not what I expected. I thought it would be about the art. Instead, the cover of Carmel magazine featured a black and white photo of me looking directly into the lens, holding my camera. The headline read, The Invisible Woman Screams. The subtitle, Artist Wendy Dixon on Art, Family, and the Email That Changed Everything. It was explosive. Susan had written it beautifully, but she hadn't softened the blows. She laid it all out. She described the perfect house in Wellesley. She described the anniversary party. She quoted the lawsuit my parents had filed, and then, in a sidebar, she published the text of the emails. The reaction was instant. First, it was the locals. People came into the cafe just to high-five me. Mrs. Peyton came in and bought coffee for everyone in line, loudly declaring that the only thing worse than a bad artist is a bad mother. Then it went online. Someone took a photo of the article and posted it on Twitter. Then someone made a TikTok about it. The phrase, free help, started trending. People began sharing their own stories of being the glass child, the scapegoat, the invisible sibling. My inbox flooded with messages from strangers, women in Ohio, teenagers in London, grandmothers in Japan, telling me that I had given them a voice. And then, the silence from Boston broke. It didn't break with a lawsuit. It broke with a ringtone. It was my aunt, Ruth's sister, not Patricia, but a cousin I hadn't spoken to in years. She called me, breathless. "Wendy," she said, "oh my God, have you seen the Wellesley Community Facebook page?" "No," I said. "I blocked that years ago." "It's a bloodbath," she said. "Someone linked the article. Everyone has seen it. Mrs. Gabley commented that she always suspected Patricia was cruel. The pastor gave a sermon on Sunday about the sin of pride and looking down on your children." "What is my mother doing?" I asked. "She's in hiding," the cousin said. "She hasn't left the house in 2 days. She resigned from the church committee. Megan deactivated her Instagram because people were spamming her comments with free help." I felt a strange sensation in my chest. It wasn't joy. It wasn't triumph. It was simply balance. The scales had finally tipped. The lawsuit disappeared 2 days later. Marcus got the call. The lawyer for my parents had withdrawn the case. They dropped the injunction. They dropped the theft charge. They dropped everything. They realized, Marcus said, handing me the phone, that a public trial would only mean more press, and the one thing your mother cannot survive is more press. I had won. The money was unlocked. The art was mine. The camera was mine. But the real victory came a week later, in the form of a letter. It wasn't from a lawyer. It wasn't from my mother. It was from my father. It was a handwritten note sent to the gallery. "Wendy, I read the article. I read the emails you shared. I want to be angry. I want to tell you that you humiliated us. Your mother hasn't stopped crying. We can't go to the country club without people whispering." But I sat in my study last night and I looked at the photos of the trip to Hawaii, the trip you didn't go on. And I realized something. In every photo, your mother is smiling, Megan is smiling, the kids are smiling. But I look tired. I realized that for 30 years I let you carry the load. I let you be the buffer. I let you be the one who made everything smooth so I didn't have to deal with your mother's demands or your sister's drama. I treated you like an employee because it was easier than treating you like a daughter. I don't expect you to forgive me. I don't expect you to come home. In fact, you shouldn't come home. We don't deserve you. I transferred the money for the room and board your mother demanded into your account. It's not a reimbursement, it's an apology. Make good art. Dad. I sat on the porch of the cafe and cried. I cried for the father I could have had. I cried for the years I lost. But mostly, I cried because he had finally seen me. He hadn't seen me with love, necessarily, but he had seen me with clarity, and that was all I had ever wanted. 6 months later, the season in Carmel has changed. The fog is heavier now, rolling in off the Pacific in thick gray waves. I have my own apartment now. It's not big, but it's mine. It has windows that face the ocean. I painted the walls a soft, warm yellow, the opposite of beige. I bought a couch that is bright teal velvet. It is loud. It takes up space, just like me. My career has exploded. The Invisible Women series traveled to San Francisco, then to New York. I am currently working on a new series called Boundaries. It is about fences, walls, and the lines we draw in the sand to protect ourselves. I haven't spoken to my mother or Megan. I blocked them again after the lawsuit was dropped. I hear through the grapevine that Megan is pregnant with her 3rd child, and she is struggling. She has gone through 3 nannies in 6 months. Apparently, it's hard to find good help when you refuse to treat people like human beings. My mother is still isolating. The Queen of Wellesley lost her crown. She still lives in the big white house, but the phone doesn't ring as much as it used to. The image cracked, and she is too proud to glue it back together. I still work at the cafe 2 mornings a week, not because I need the money, I really don't, but because I like it. I like the routine. I like seeing Mr. Henderson. I like being grounded, and I like being close to Ruth, who saved me, Ruth, who opened the door when I had nowhere else to go. One evening, I was walking on the beach with my camera. The sun was setting, turning the water into liquid fire. I saw a family playing in the surf, a mother, a father, and 2 daughters. The older daughter was running ahead, chasing a seagull. The parents were focused on the younger one, who was crying about sand in her shoe. I watched the older girl. She stopped running. She looked back at her parents. They weren't looking at her. She stood there for a moment, a small silhouette against the vast ocean, waiting to be noticed. I raised my camera. I focused the lens. I saw the loneliness in her shoulders. I saw the question in her posture. Do I matter? I snapped the photo. And then, I did something I had never done before. I lowered the camera. I walked over to the parents. "Excuse me," I said. They looked up, surprised. "Your daughter," I said, pointing to the girl by the water. "She just did the most amazing cartwheel. You missed it." The mother looked at the older girl. "Did she?" "Yes," I said. "You should watch her. She's pretty incredible." The mother smiled. She called out, "Hey, do it again! We're watching!" The little girl's face lit up. She beamed. She did another cartwheel. It was clumsy and crooked, but her parents clapped. She laughed. She wasn't invisible anymore. I walked away. I walked back to my car, my camera heavy and comforting against my side. I can't save everyone. I can't go back and save the little girl I used to be. I can't force my family to love me the way I deserved. But I can see, I can witness, and I can choose. I chose myself, and in the end, that was the only masterpiece that mattered. If you have made it this far, if you have listened to my story, I have one question for you. Is there a room in your life where you feel invisible? Is there a table where you are always serving and never eating? If there is, I want you to know something. You don't have to flip the table. You don't have to scream. You just have to put down the tray, walk to the door, and leave. Because the world is big, the light is gold, and there are people out there who are dying to see you. My name is Wendy Dixon. I am an artist, and I am finally, wonderfully visible.